The Rockefeller name once stood for oil, banking, and unmatched American power. But behind that name was a quieter question, one never written in board minutes or history books. When David Rockefeller was gone, he left no throne to inherit. Instead, he left a burden shared by 6 children. Some chose institutions, some chose ideas, some chose service. Others chose distance, boundaries, and silence. Each carried the same last name. Each carried it in a very different way. So how does one of America's greatest family legacies survive? When it is passed not as a title, but as a responsibility? If you enjoy thoughtful stories about legacy, family, and the unseen forces that shape American history, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support truly matters. Now let's begin with part 1. Rockefeller was passed down as a system, not a throne. Part 1. Rockefeller was passed down as a system, not a throne. David Rockefeller did not leave behind a successor's chair in the dynastic sense. He left behind a system, a network of family foundations, institutions, and reputation management habits, something outsiders perceive as power, but insiders experience as a discipline of living. Together with his wife, Margaret Peggy McGrath Rockefeller, he had 6 children: David Rockefeller Jr., Abby Rockefeller Mousey, Neva Rockefeller Goodwin, Peggy Dulany, Richard Rockefeller, and Eileen Rockefeller Grold. Within this family, a recurring negative callback left a distinct imprint on each child: tight self-control, an obsession with being properly Rockefeller, and a habit of keeping emotions carefully contained. It helped them remain steady under public scrutiny, but it also caused many personal decisions to feel as though they were being lived under a name that demanded constant perfection. Thus, the question, how was the Rockefeller legacy passed down, is not about who would run the bank, but rather who would preserve the family spirit, managing wealth, managing influence, and managing responsibility while each child walked a different path. Part 2. David Rockefeller Jr., the keeper of the family's institutional rhythm. David Rockefeller Jr. is often regarded as the child closest to the family's central axis. Public biographies describe his deep involvement with family organizations such as the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, the David Rockefeller Fund, and leadership roles connected to the Rockefeller Foundation, as well as associations with Rockefeller and Company, Rockefeller Capital Management. Internally, David Jr. appears to live between 2 rooms. One room of principal process, governance, continuity. One room of memory, the Rockefeller name as an unspoken vow. The negative callback that follows David Jr. is quiet but persistent, the fear that a single misstep could cause the entire family to be judged. For him, legacy is not something to display. It is something to keep in rhythm, steady, durable, and carefully aligned. The inheritance he carries is therefore distinctly Rockefeller in form, not becoming a new symbol but maintaining the structure, ensuring that foundations, philanthropic networks, and family mechanisms function as a living system, not dependent on any single individual. Part 3. Abby Rockefeller Mousey, inheriting through distance and descent. Abby Rockefeller Mousey is often publicly described as leaning towards social, environmental, and feminist activism. Family overviews frequently identify her as a more critical voice among David Rockefeller's children. Internally, Abby appears to inherit the legacy by refusing to step directly into it. She perceives Rockefeller as a gravitational force: stand too close and risk being absorbed, stand too far and risk being seen as rejecting one's origin. The negative callback Abby confronts most clearly is this: politeness can become a wall. In powerful families, members learn to say the right things, in the right places, at the right times, until genuine emotion is wrapped in layers of civility. Abby seems to choose the opposite path, expressing stronger positions, accepting friction, and allowing edges to remain sharp so that the Rockefeller name does not soften her identity beyond recognition. Her inheritance does not lie in operational control, but in paradox. She prevents the legacy from becoming a single, unchallenged narrative. When a family contains dissent, Its legacy is forced to examine itself, and sometimes that is precisely what allows it to endure. Part 4. Neva Rockefeller Goodwin, Carrying the Legacy into Ideas. Neva Rockefeller Goodwin is an economist, publicly associated with contextual economics and long-standing academic work at Tufts University's Global Development and Environment Institute. If David Jr. maintains structure, Neva maintains ways of thinking. Internally, she appears to confront a difficult question familiar to heirs of great wealth. If I speak about social justice, will anyone believe me? The negative callback that often accompanies Neva is the fear of being perceived as performing morality, a shadow that follows many descendants of powerful families. Rather than retreat into silence, she chose academia, where claims must be supported by argument, evidence, and sustained debate. The legacy transmitted through Neva thus takes on a modern Rockefeller form. Wealth is not only money but the ability to shape discourse. She inherits the family platform, yet uses it as a launchpad for inquiry into development, environment, and human sustainability. Part 5. Peggy Dulany, Turning a Famous Name into a Method of Collaboration. Peggy Dulany, Margaret Dulany, Peggy Rockefeller, is publicly recognized as a philanthropist and activist, noted as the founder of Synergos, 1986, and later co-founder of the Global Philanthropists Circle, 2001, alongside her father. Internally, Peggy carries an understandable tension: follow the family's traditional philanthropic style and risk being seen as predictable, diverge from it and risk being seen as rejecting the Rockefeller way. The recurring negative callback in Peggy's journey is doubt from the world about the motives of the wealthy, and doubt within herself about whether she is truly helping or merely easing inherited guilt. Peggy answers this tension with a distinctly Rockefeller choice. She focuses on method. The legacy she carries is not about how much to give, but about building collaborative frameworks, spaces where diverse actors can trust one another and work together over time. In a world skeptical of inherited influence, method becomes a safeguard against legacy turning into a slogan. Part 6. Richard Rockefeller, Inheriting Through Service and the Cost of Responsibility. Richard Rockefeller, 1949–2014, is publicly remembered for his involvement in medicine and philanthropy. He passed away in 2014. Internally, Richard can be seen as inheriting the legacy in its least performative form, through direct service. While the Rockefeller name is often linked to large institutions, foundations, boards, councils, Richard represents a closer, more personal engagement with helping others. Here, the negative callback becomes sharply defined: the pressure to be worthy. A Rockefeller engaged in service is praised, but also placed on a moral stage, expected to be more devoted, more selfless, more correct than ordinary people. The legacy passed through Richard is therefore fragile in nature. It demonstrates that the family can nurture genuine service while also revealing that the rhythm of responsibility leaves little room for personal weakness. Outsiders see honor. Insiders often feel obligation. Part 7. Eileen Rockefeller Grold, Preserving Boundaries and Redefining Contribution. Eileen Rockefeller Grold, the youngest child, is listed among David Rockefeller's children in public records. In a family where the name itself functions as power, one of the hardest choices is not to do something grand, but to do what is personally authentic without pulling the name off balance. Eileen represents a quieter form of inheritance, proving that one need not lead a bank or foundation to be a legitimate carrier of legacy. The negative callback associated with Eileen and shared by all siblings is the feeling of being viewed as part of a family brand. When privacy attracts public curiosity, boundaries become a survival skill. The legacy transmitted through Eileen can thus be understood as preservation, maintaining personal boundaries, maintaining a degree of normalcy, and reminding the family that contribution does not have a single shape. Sometimes, protecting individual well-being is itself a form of safeguarding legacy, because a legacy cannot endure if those carrying it are exhausted. Part 8. Conclusion. The Rockefeller legacy is passed through roles, not performances. Through 6 children, the Rockefeller legacy appears as a multi-voiced composition. David Rockefeller Jr. maintains rhythm through institutions and family structure. Abby Rockefeller Mause maintains rhythm through descent and distance, preventing the legacy from becoming a single narrative. Neva Rockefeller Goodwin maintains rhythm through ideas and scholarship, turning influence into knowledge. Peggy Dulany maintains rhythm through collaborative philanthropic methods, transforming resources into networks of action. Richard Rockefeller maintained rhythm through service, reminding the family that legacy does not reside only in boards and foundations. Eileen Rockefeller Growold maintains rhythm through boundaries and personal sustainability, reminding us that people cannot live as symbols alone. Across all of them, the recurring negative callback, clearly named and deeply felt, is the pressure to live up to the Rockefeller standard: self-control, image management, emotional restraint. That pattern helps the family survive public scrutiny, but also forces each child to find a personal way to remain whole. If it must be reduced to a single sentence, the Rockefeller legacy is not handed down like a title it seeps in as a responsibility. Each child carries it differently, sometimes resisting it, sometimes embracing it, but none escaping the family's recurring question: am I living as a human being or as a requirement of the name?